Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. Thank you very much for choosing this session and attending. So let's get started and quickly talk about Flutter Web and see, as a web developer, how we can use that. So let me just quickly start with this slide. So have you ever seen this slide? So perhaps you even have worked with that. So let me just quickly maybe play with that a little bit. So you see that you can just go there, maybe like, you know, you played with this game probably, or maybe you have seen this amazing website for Nike, so that you can choose these amazing, shoes, right? Or maybe you have seen, or let me just show you this one. How about this animation? Right in my slide, right? And I can just swap, and you see okay, I can a little bit play with that, and very good. So it's very smooth. So it might not seem very smooth in the stream right now, but it's very smooth. So there are all links over there. You can just go after the talk and click and play with that. But what if I tell you that all of these demos right now are offline and they have been built with Flutter? And they are all on web. So you can find them either on the link that I deploy on Netlify, or you can find them on CodePen. So actually, you can play with Flutter on CodePen. So it's been there for a while. So isn't it amazing? I'm going to show you how you can do that today. How you can do these stuff with Flutter today. So let's go through the agenda quickly. So I'm going to show you like how Flutter Web works, and a quick comparison and similarities between Dart and TypeScript and JavaScript, and then quickly show you like the similar concept in Flutter that is, as a web developer, is very familiar to us. And also, I'm going to show you like how you can start, where to start, and at the end, one demo to just wrap up and see you how amazing is this framework right now, even though it's in beta stage. So, but let me introduce myself before that. My name is Majid HAJIAN. I'm based in Oslo. I'm a software engineer, passionate, just like you, passionate developer. And I do quite a lot of community stuff, training, workshop, books, and many other things that you can find about me probably on the internet. I'm also organizing one of the biggest conferences, which is coming for Flutter in November. Mark your calendar, 17 to 19 of November, Flutter Vikings. So you can find more information about that, fluttervikings.com. But let's get started. Let me tell you quickly to just what is Flutter quickly. Flutter is it's just the UI toolkit. It's nothing. It's a framework to just help you to create something with UI widgets and components, let's say, very quickly and very beautifully. And it compiles all of those UIs to the native code, which means that they're going to run very fast and very smooth. And you can also actually, initially when Flutter came, it was targeted for iOS and Android, but now it also supports web, desktop, and embedded version of the different devices. And you can write all of that just with one language, right? Isn't it amazing? So, but what makes Flutter unique is that it gives you a flexibility in the UI level. So it's a lot of for instance, you have material app, a material widgets that it's already built by Google, and then you can customize that quite a lot. Or if in particular, I'm talking about web, or you can create your own, let's say, theme out of that material, whatever you want. The development speed is quite fast. You have hot reload, so it helps you to just quickly iterate and finish what you are doing in development environment. Also, when it compiles the native code, it gives you a very good performance. So you can run your app in 60 FPS. And on top of all of that, it helps you, it makes you very productive, because a lot of things are already there. You just need to quickly wrap them up, and it's like a piece of puzzles. You just attach them together and make your puzzle very quickly. So under the hood, how it works is that there are a couple of layers in the Flutter architecture. So we're going to talk about two main layers of that for now, and which is the top layer, which is the Flutter, the Dart framework, where you are going to work with that. And then and another layer that is the engine of the Flutter, and it's trying to render and paint everything for you. Sorry. So in iOS and Android, you have a Skia, you have Dart VM, and they are all helping you to just compile your Dart code to like a native Android and iOS code. But how it works in web is that, well, technically, if you remove that layer of Skia and C++ code and just have maybe another engine which compiles everything at the end to JavaScript and similar, like popular or familiar API in the browser, like Canvas or DOM and things like that, then you have Flutter, a framework over there, and then you compile to web browser. And this is exactly how it works. And that's why you have one framework, one language, you write everything over there, and then you have it in several different platforms, and it works perfectly. So, but speaking of the Dart, we're talking about Dart, right? As a web developer, we are probably familiar with TypeScript or JavaScript, right? Before that, I want to just mention that, like, why Dart then? The reason is that Dart is easy to learn. You're going to see it in a second. And there are lots of familiar syntax and APIs that you can find, or concepts that you can find as over there. As a user that work with maybe a dynamic language like JavaScript, or a very strict static, let's say, language like maybe Java or some other languages, right? So it covers both, you know, users with many different experiences. So in fact, if I want to give you a hint, like how it's similar to JavaScript and TypeScript. So you probably are familiar with event loop in JavaScript, right? So, and you know that JavaScript runs in single thread, and this is exactly what Dart does. So it's similar concept, you know, or Dart also has just-in-time compilation because it just helps you to develop faster, especially in development mode. And also it has one more thing on top of that, which JavaScript probably doesn't have, but maybe TypeScript and some of the tools can give you, is ahead of time compilation, which optimize your final bundle size and final code way better than like the development for production, right? And it's type safe. So if you have worked with TypeScript, so you may be familiar with this concept. Okay, but let me just compare a couple of syntax from TypeScript and Dart. So in TypeScript, we write a class, let's say a user, and then we define our constructor to pass some like variable, and then we have our local variable here, like a public, let's say ID, which the type is number, or the injection of the name variable is string. So you define it in TypeScript in this way, right? Probably familiar to you right now. And then you may have a method in that class that, for instance, here you have a fetch method, which is an asynchronous or a promise function, right? Which returns a promise, as you see here. And this is how it works in in terms of let's say promise functions, right? So how you want to use that is that you can have a main function, for instance, and you need an async keyword here because you want to use a wait, for instance, if you are familiar with this concept, and then you go ahead and instantiate your class, you get your object back, and then you can call your method, you wait for promise as normal, and you just console like something. And then if you want to run this method, you just call this method, right? Main, call it, and that's it. But then how it works in Dart, let's just compare quickly. First of all, the constructor is changing to, instead of constructor keyword, the name of constructor in Dart is the same as the class, right? Same as a class. So that makes it simple. That's nice. And then you can also have a reference to the local variable, to the constructor, and then define your type over there. So it seems like ID and name here in this case. Don't worry about final keyword here. It's similar to let, for instance, or const in JavaScript. In particular, maybe const is a better equivalent. However, let's go for that. So you see that in TypeScript, you have a dot, and then you have like colon, and then you have your type defined. But in Dart, you just define type before the object, and that's it. So syntax is not that hard to learn. So sometimes it's even more verbose, and you like it more. And you define your method in this way. And then if you want to say this method is like a feature or a promise equivalent in JavaScript, then you use a sync keyword after that function. And then you get access to, and then you define your feature. So in Dart, we call these asynchronous way of coding a feature. There are a couple of different ones, which I'm going to mention in the next slide as well. So how are you going to use that, though? So simple. So I'm so sorry. In Dart, so you have main function, and if you have a main function in one file, Dart will call that function immediately. So you don't need to call that function later. So you see here that I say now I want an async function, and then you instantiate a class, easy. You don't need keyword, it's optional, so you can just get rid of that. You get access to your method, again, similar. And instead of console log, you have print. So isn't it easy? So far. So with just one slide, actually, maybe I'm on board you for 40% of what you need to start with Dart right now. Let's move on to the next one. In Dart, because asynchronous programming or reactive programming is also two approaches. So reactive programming is covered by streams, which is in JavaScript, you don't have that. But if you're familiar with the concept of RxJS or observables, they are pretty similar. So in JavaScript, you have RxJS, you can use observables, and and then you can start using that or subscribe to something, and then that continuously gets updated until you unsubscribe from that observable. In Dart, you also have the similar concept, but that is named stream. And with some other packages like Rx Dart, you can get similar functionality as RxJS, same observable pattern. So it's similar, but then instead of subscribe function, then you have listen, and that's it. Simple. You just listen. As long as you listen to something, you get updated about that particular value. But okay, see, the differences are very for TypeScript users especially, it's not that much. Or the JavaScript users that who already use the stream and they know asynchronous programming, it's fairly simple. You can just jump into the Dart. I promise you, within an hour, you are up and running. You can write your functions and start writing your code in Dart. So, but it's mostly about Flutter, right? When you come to Flutter, then the first thing that you hear probably is that everything is a widget. Well, okay, I'm a web developer, right? As I'm talking as a web developer right now. When I come to a Flutter app, and then I see that everyone says everything is a widget, it's quickly coming some idea to my mind. Oh, isn't it similar to web components? Like, if it just right now compare the syntax, you see that we have a class, and this is hello world, and extend stateless widgets from Flutter. And then you have build method, which is building or rendering something or painting something on the screen for you. For instance, here is just a text file, hello world. But a similar concept in JavaScript world or in HTML5 web component is you just create your web component class, hello world, and you extend it from HTML elements. And then there is a connected callback where you can actually, once this web component is attached to the DOM, then you can render what you want to render. Here is a p tag with hello world. Similar concept, right? But if you have not done web component so far, no worries. Probably you are familiar with other frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, right? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Yes. So yes, you may be familiar with other frameworks, for instance. So in this case, I'm sorry, React, for instance. Or if you work with Vue or maybe Angular or other frameworks, for instance. So the concept of component is similar to this. So you have in React, for instance, you extend your React component, you create your own component, you have a render function and you render something, right? Similar concept. So when you come to Flutter right now, you feel home because you're creating the same concept, but a little bit different naming. So you have your widget. When you say widget, you can just have an equivalent of a web version of that. So, and when it comes to the widget in Flutter, luckily there is also there is only two types of widgets, similar again to React components. You have either a stateless widget or a stateful widget. Stateful contains the states, and you can just update. And once you update something, then it re-renders again or rebuild. That's a better term in Flutter. But in React, you have the similar concept, right? So if you have a state, if you set a state, even the name of function in Flutter is set a state, same name as React. So similar concept again. So, and the stateless widget is a DOM component. It just renders. It just gets something and renders. It doesn't have a state. So when it comes to web, we as a developer, if you're talking about components or web components, let's say here, or React components, so you may have like my app header component, which contains some other components, which renders something for you, right? Or you may have a DOM, like a div element, and then set some CSS and some styling to that, right? This is pretty much similar in Dart, except you write everything in Dart, in Flutter, and you write everything in Dart. So you have your material app, and you say, for my home, I have my scaffold, and that is a widget which does something scaffolding for you. And then you have app bar, then you create a text widget. You see here, the concept of DOM, the way that we are writing markup languages, it doesn't exist, or the way that we are defining a style doesn't exist. There is no CSS here. There is no markup language here. You just write Dart, 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 and it's all Dart. And this is amazing to me. It's a new way of programming for web. So let's have a look at some example. When I say no CSS, for instance, here, usually you define a class. So you have a couple of properties and values, and then you assign that class to a DOM, and then it gets, rendered and painted on the browser. So in the same equivalent in the Flutter, you can have several different widgets for doing the same purpose. For instance, padding on the left for HTML is padding, but then here there is a widget called padding, and that widget can have child, because even in JavaScript world, you are creating these hierarchy or DOM trees. So here's the similar. So you have a trees of widgets here. So you create your instead of a center, you use center widget. Then you have a child. You create padding. You give some padding with extra with a child, and that gives you a text. You render a text and gives that text some extra text style, and then all you can define here to get the same purpose, right? There is no CSS for doing advanced stuff, like when you want to have some type of background gradients, or when you want to create something very advanced with CSS, you can achieve almost the same thing with Flutter or Dart. In this case, you have widget for everything. For instance, box decoration here, linear gradient. You define all of that. This is very declarative, right? You have everything over there. If you have your editor set up, you even have a very good, intelligence way of writing your code. So you have everything in your browser. You just click and get and even see the documentation immediately. Like I said, there is no template, there's no markup languages, so you cannot say div or blah, 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 blah. So it's all Dart. So you define everything here. You need to find a widget for that to render that. And there are tons of widgets already created for you. So in terms of events, if you need a click or swap or something like that, then you have advanced widgets such as gesture detectors, and you can even extend them and add more functionality to them. For instance, create your own type of click events with gesture detector or doing something extra. And then you have different callbacks to do different actions for different things, like on click or on tab, doing this, doing that, right? So in terms of passing around or dependency injection, you have inherited widgets, which gives you an ability to provide something from very top to the very child, to the very down of the tree. So for instance, if you are familiar with the concept of Redux, so you can have like a store provider widget, and then you can provide that store to any child afterwards and get access to that. Similar concept again in web, right? You may ask, right, how routing works. Again, Flutter gives you a routing system. Now it's version 1, and version 2 is also already there, so you can play with that later. But the point here is that there is a routing mechanism already in Flutter, which you can play with that. You can register your route. You can say, for instance, which route needs to get what type of widget you are creating. And then at that route, that widget will get rendered or paints on the browser. So you can have advanced parameters for this routing as well to just send all the query parameters or things like that if you want. So you may ask, okay, when it comes to web, responsiveness, it's pretty important, right? You cannot build an app that is not responsive anymore. It's not a trend for 2020 or 2021 soon, right? So, but in Flutter, you have several approaches to do that. Like you can use layout builder, for instance, class, or you can use media query to get the size of the device or browser and do something with that. For instance, let me just tell you a class here. If you can create like a responsive widget class, you can define what type of screen you are targeting. Here is a snippet code here for larger screen. You see that I'm getting the query, the size of the width of the size of the width of the browser with the media query, and I define it in a different way here. So you have full flexibility here to do whatever you want. And then afterwards, you can actually create your styling, your widgets based on the query, based on these media queries. I'm going to show you a demo at the end of the talk to see how it works actually. Animations, as a web developer, probably it's a little bit difficult to work with animation and get us 60 FPS on the web, right? But in Flutter, you have a lot of already built-in widgets, which is compiling to the web animations for you and gives you a very smooth 60 FPS animation. You saw that swapping demo in the beginning of the talk, and that was built like this. And if you go and check out the code, see like it's not too difficult to create that. So when it comes to web, progressive web apps, which I'm also a big fan, It's important. You want to make your application work offline. You want to load a second load being faster, let's say afterwards, or the first load, or you want to actually give native-like experience to your web, right? Web app, right? And Flutter has at least by now a basic support for service worker to make your app offline. And you saw all of the demos in the beginning of the top were offline. So even if I didn't have internet, doesn't matter. I already load them and they could load. And that was the reason you saw them very fast when I clicked to slides. And you have also a couple of other meta tags in your HTML file for Flutter, which gives you some of those normal behavior or natural behavior of a native app. You have also manifest. You can play with that. You can have like install this Flutter web app on the home screen with manifest as well. When it comes to debugging, Flutter gives you a tool that is consistent between different platforms. And one of those platforms for now, today, we're talking about web, and Flutter actually gives you this ability to debug with Dart dev tools, and you can simply see the trees of the widget and inspect whatever you want. If you want to actually inspect with Flutter, with Chrome debugger, let's say inspector, you might get a little bit lost over there because the source code of Flutter render after Flutter is rendering something, it's a bit different from what you see in a normal web JavaScript frameworks. And that is actually makes it a little bit special here, I think, because you have now more power, I believe, and you will have more power in the near future with this framework. So in terms of modern web, several different APIs are already available in Dart and Flutter. You can use them. And I know that there are some work in Flutter team that they may want to actually ship some part of the Flutter engine or something like that, or Canvas kit, let's say, with WebAssembly. And that means then you get like maybe higher performance, and the rendering with WebGL maybe gives you a way better performance than even normal web applications. There are several other APIs that are already also available, and you can use them. And in terms of community, for sure, it's an amazing community, and you have lots of packages already there. Recently, in Flutter community, we announced plus packages, which actually gives you a one package supported for all platforms, and you can, without thinking of which platform you are building with Flutter, you get the same API, and then you render and build for that. But how you have to start? First, you need to get your editor of your choice, for sure. And what if I tell you it's as simple as this? You just, as soon as the setup for the Flutter is done, you just run Flutter channel. You need to switch to beta channel. Unfortunately, Flutter has 4 channels: stable, beta, dev, and master. You need to use beta. The reason is that Flutter Web is still in beta stage. Then probably you need to enable Flutter with the flag, enable Flutter. You create your app. You go to your app and run Flutter run and just run Flutter run -d Chrome, and here you go. Boom, everything is set up, even hot reload, so you're good to go. So, and in terms of a structure, you may see that the structure is similar to this. When you open that, you can ignore Android and iOS as a web developer, perhaps, but you may want to actually build for them. That is the reason you may love Flutter, because you can write one code and then at the same time you can use it in several different platforms, and that is awesome. You can share your code between platforms, but then you can go to lib for their main file is the entry file for writing your widgets. You start from here, and then you have your web entry HTML file if you want to change something over there. And after you build, it goes to build a web folder. Let's have a look at the demo quickly. The demo here is a Facebook app. This is built with Flutter. Isn't it amazing? Like, you don't feel this is built with amazing. And it actually runs offline right now. And I can smoothly go there. You see, oh, okay, it's not implemented here. Go there, go there. And let's have a look at the mobile and tablet version of that. The same app runs on the mobile, it's responsive, and tablet here. And it was desktop in the previous slide. Same code, same thing. So you get access to this code later. You can go and check it out. But what we learned today, first of all, how Flutter Web works. You see that how easy was. It's not easy actually, but how under the hood the engine works. To compile your Dart code to JavaScript, we compared quickly the similarities between Dart and TypeScript, and so that Dart is very easy to learn. It's not scary. And you see that Flutter, how there are similar concepts for Flutter and web, so you can actually get used to that. You already get used to that, so you can go and use it in Flutter, just with the different names, perhaps. And let me tell you that the reason of taste of Flutter, taste of web with Flutter is a talk is that to say the future of the web perhaps is changing because a lot of new APIs is coming. The web is very complex right now. You have several different APIs to get access to the low-level hardware, let's say, from web, right? Like Worklet's API, like all of those advanced API, WebAssembly one. So it gives you a different way of developing with the app, especially with Flutter, which you can share your app between several different platforms with one single code base. But before we finish this talk, as I mentioned, Flutter is in beta stage. I have to say that there are still some stuff that needs to be improved. So accessibility, better accessibility, or SEO maybe is one of them, or a little bit better performance. It's already good enough, but some stuff needs to be improved. And maybe some stuff that it's not web behavior. So maybe you want it in a web behavior, like autofill, or when you right click on something, you don't see the way that you see it in Android, for instance. You want it in a web way. And maybe code size. But all in all, we have already built an app in our company and shipped it to production. And that app doesn't need some of those improvement already. Like we didn't need SEO, we didn't need the code size wasn't that much important, or autofill wasn't that much important. So we decided to do it and we ship it. And so some of the big players did that, like Rive 2. It's a great company which is creating 2D animations for web and Flutter and other platforms. And they are also shipped a web application, the second version with Flutter Web. And with that said, thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to answer any question. If there is no question, then I hope that you learned something today, and go and Flutter, test Flutter right now. Not right now, just watch the talks after the conference. Thank you.